I did. I didn't like PCR.
Good afternoon, everyone,
Surgery was better.
and welcome to all that are gathered here today and to Chicago Heights, our candidates and sponsors there. It's a blessing to be gathering in this 50-plus degree weather instead of the polar vortex a week ago, right? So a memorable January of 2019. I'm excited about our formation program today, and I think you are too. It will include 3 different presentations entitled Uncovering the Light of the Gospel, AntiRacism, Jubilee Farm, and Cor Unum, our House of Hospitality. Each will be 40 to 45 minutes long with a short break in between. And this is the session that I ask for you to plan for extra time today so that you bring your beds and your sleeping mats. Our Dominican mission statement reads, called by God into right relationship with all creation and graced by Dominican life and mission, we compassionately preach the gospel of Jesus Christ. It is part of our Dominican vision to commit ourselves to living the gospel charism by embracing the courage and trust of our foundresses and responding to the signs of the times. These 3 presentations will give you a glimpse of how we are trying to preach the gospel in today's world and how we are partnering with our associates and many others to do so. Our first speakers this morning are Daphne Skretvedt and Sister Miriam Schulte. And I did say to Daphne that I'm not cutting her bio because I think you need to hear the whole part that she wrote. And I need to add glasses. Daphne was born in St. Lucia, where she attended school at St. Joseph's Convent until entrance to the University of Edinburgh in Scotland on the award of an Ireland scholarship. She graduated with an arts degree and a diploma in social studies from Edinburgh, and then a master's equivalent in medical social work from London. Work assignments were in London, Trinidad and Tobago, Minnesota, North Dakota, and Geneva, Switzerland. She retired from the United Nations and the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Geneva. Service with UNHCR took her on assignment to various European countries, Africa, Russian Federation, Pakistan, and the former Yugoslavia. On returning to the USA, Daphne was actively involved with United Congregations of Metro East and as an associate with the Springfield Dominicans anti-racism team. She has been married since 1964 to Merlin Skretvedt, who's with us today next to Sister Palmieri. She met Merlin when he was serving with the Peace Corps at St. Lucia. They have 2 daughters, one in St. Louis and the other in France, and 4 grandchildren. She is indebted to her husband's lifelong enthusiasm to serve in underprivileged countries. His initiatives in seeking employment with these agencies provided her with opportunities for a very rich and rewarding life work experience. Our second speaker with Daphne is Sister Miriam Schulte. Sister Miriam has been a longtime supporter of the associate program and has sponsored several associate candidates through the years. She has ministered in Catholic schools as teacher and principal, and in fact I followed her at Little Flower School in Springfield, and she has served as Prioress General of our congregation. She currently lives in Alton, where she is beginning her 18th year as a licensed counselor with Madison County Catholic Charities. She is here today as a member of our Springfield Dominican anti-racism team, which is called SSTART. And some of the members of our anti-racism team are here. If you could raise your hand, please. Thank you. And so we welcome both Daphne and Sister Miriam, who are going to lead us in our prayer today.
You'll be happy to know that because it's the only language I speak, the presentation will be in English. We will begin with the prayer. I think you have an opening prayer. I would like to suggest that we do the prayer antiphonally, even though it's not a psalm. So if the people over on this side will be side 1, and the people over on Daphne's side will be side 2, and we'll alternate the phrases. Notice that the prayer is by Macrina Whitaker, whom many of you are probably familiar with. Let us pray. O God of all peoples, all nations, all seasons, all years, all hours and days, you who have invited us to love, hear our cry, listen to our prayer.
Make our spirits free, our hearts open, our minds healthy, our souls awake.
Then we will be able to love as you have asked, with all our hearts, all our minds, all our souls.
The all is frightening, yet in our deepest moments of truth, we know that this is what we desire.
O God of all, hear us. In Christ's name we pray. Thank you for the introduction, Joe. You raised the bar really high. At the General Chapter of 2005, we, the Dominican Sisters of Springfield, unanimously committed ourselves to becoming an anti-racism institution. We realized at the time that this was a very long-range goal, primarily because it demands a conversion of heart and not merely a change of behaviors. Thus, it is in fact, as is true of all conversion, an endeavor for life. Daphne and I are here, as you know, as members of SDART, the Springfield Dominican Anti-Racism Team, a team formed some 15 years ago with the explicit task to lead our congregation, its members, and sponsored institution and works toward living the gospel stance of anti-racism. This is a work to which all of you are invited. Many of you are already active by virtue of, first of all, your baptism, and finally, either as a Dominican sister of Springfield or an associate or a candidate for association. Daphne is going to speak to the origin of our vision statement because she's one of the founding members of the team.
Yes, thank you for your presence here this afternoon. And I hope you get as excited about this work as we are, who are members of the team. When we were forming the team, we had a pre-team called the, we were the Design Task Force. And we were tasked with coming up with a vision statement which would show the community, or which would envision to the community the kind of approach and stance that they should have concerning this sin of racism. I would like you perhaps to read this together with us and to try to incorporate some of the meaning of the words that we put together very, very carefully. So let's read it together.
We, the Dominican Sisters of Springfield, Illinois, are called by God to live and preach the gospel of Jesus Christ in a church and world suffering from the sin of racism. As an anti-racist institution, we are accountable to people of color in mutual relationships based on respect, equality, and justice. Together we examine and redefine all aspects of our life, mission, and ministry to incorporate and witness anti-racism. We commit as a publicly identified anti-racist congregation to work toward an inclusive and anti-racism church and world.
As you see from this statement, the work of the anti-racism team is based on the gospel. We are all part of the family of Christ, and our entire work is based on carrying out the mission of Jesus Christ as far as racism and anti-racism work is concerned. I'm not going to go into the detail, but I'd like to highlight that second paragraph. We are accountable to people of color in mutual relationships based on respect, equality, and justice. This is the reason the sisters could not do this work alone. The sisters need to hear, and I'm going to say it openly, white people need to hear the lived experience of people of color. Unless you hear that, unless you know the lived experience, you cannot really enter into the work of dismantling racism. So, and this has to be done in a spirit of mutual relationships with respect, with equality, and with justice. All of this based on the gospel of Jesus Christ. I don't think I want to go any more into the vision statement. You have it before you. You can continue to look at it, to incorporate it in your lives, I hope, and perhaps even to join with us in this work. It's no secret that racism and anti-racism is being talked about very openly right now, and I'm sure you have feelings and ideas about it, but we would like to share a little bit of what we know and what we've learned as team members of the SDOT and our continuing work with the sisters. Thank you.
Thank you. As good Dominican teachers, we want to begin with a few definitions. You have papers of definitions on your table. We are not going to take the time to go through all the definitions. Aren't you glad? I do want to focus on the very primary definition, however, and that is of racism itself. The definition is about 2/3 of the way down the paper. I note it says, racism is race prejudice plus the misuse of power by systems and institutions based on race. The organizing work of dismantling racism is focused on systemic racism. So, racism is not just racial prejudice. That is, it is not just, although it certainly includes, the personal prejudging, stereotyping, assumptions that we often make unconsciously because we, white people in particular, are socialized into those stereotypes. Racism includes prejudice, but racism has the power for that prejudice to be enforced. And we speak of that as a misuse of power. Power in and of itself is neither good nor bad. It becomes very much a good, for example, when we organize ourselves as a community of persons in working out of shared values toward building positive relationships, creating a critical mass toward having the power to influence society. The whole notion of community and church includes the use of power for the good. When, however, we participate in the sin of racism, we participate in the promotion or the condoning of oppressive behaviors. And then we are participating in our support of a misuse of that power. We declare in that misuse of power that one group is dominant and has the power to enforce laws and practices that give advantage to the dominant group. And of course, if one group has the advantage, then the other group is disadvantaged or denied access. Therefore, they are the oppressed. Typically, when we think of racism, the dominant group is that of us white people. And the oppressed group are all people of color. So racism is race prejudice plus the misuse of power by systems and institutions. And that's how we move into a notion of systemic racism. By systems and institutions, we mean the big picture. Systems and institutions like government, education, finance, banking, transportation, law enforcement, judicial systems, healthcare, media, political systems, church. So racism is race prejudice plus the misuse of power by systems and institutions. Our work as SSTART in leading our congregation and our sponsored institutions is to dismantle systemic racism. And in that journey, we as individuals address our individual racial prejudice as well as our participation in systemic racism. Now, Daphne is going to give us a few personal experiences that highlight the need for the work.
I'm going to take as an example my interracial marriage. We got married in 1964 at a time of the civil rights, and much to my surprise, I hadn't realized that in some of the United States, this marriage would have been considered illegal. We, of course, had immediate reaction from relatives. Some showed prejudice in that, they wouldn't be coming to the wedding. Others were accepting. Some considered, well, they're going to be brown grandbabies. Are you comfortable with that, Merlin? So there was the prejudice there that was either some people absolve themselves of the prejudice. Well, we can accept your marriage. Others continue to show this prejudice. But that's one level. That's one level where people there's a simple kind of example. You're either against or for. You're either prejudiced or not. Where it becomes systemic, and this is perhaps what I would like to show you, was that this marriage would have been illegal in some states. That shows the systemic power. There was a law, and the law prescribed marriage with an interracial couple. This might help you to understand the difference between prejudice and systemic racism. It was authorized by law that he and I could not be married. Now we are going to take a few moments to view various ways people of color might experience systemic racism. We're going to show some film to kind of expand on what I have said and to give you a more graphic explanation of what we've been. I think we'd like, you've heard quite a chunk already. I wonder if you'd mind buzzing around at your table and give a little reaction among yourselves as to what you've heard and some of your reaction to that. So let's take a little time to discuss with each other. We'd like to stop the groups now. Is anyone wanting to share with us, to share with the larger group something that you've discovered or something that you'd like the rest of us to hear?
My table asked me to share. I'm born in Quincy, Illinois. Just right here in Illinois, Midwestern girl. So not a lot of racial diversity. Anywhere that I've ever lived. But several years ago, now probably 10 years ago, my brother married a young woman from India. From the country India, and we immediately loved her right away. And they have little brown babies and love them to pieces. But actually, We were kind of talking about around this table about, calling, your credit card company or a bank or a airline and getting somebody maybe with an accent from, India or somewhere else. In my experience, before I met Leica, my sister-in-law, would have probably been like, gosh, I'm having trouble understanding, but now I've been to India and her accent's like that and I've met her family and just, and now that accent, I've kind of trained myself to hear it and to really appreciate it and love it. So it's just, just a new experience, that's, I think, kind of allowed me to open my eyes, a little bit more to other cultures. So is that kind of what I said?
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you.
We were talking about personal experiences, and I grew up on a farm just north of Urbana. My 2 degrees are from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and then I worked there for 15 years. And when I was getting my master's in higher education administration, the plight of the symbol Chief Illini Wick was something that was very much on the forefront. And we were talking, and Johnetta reminded us that, it's not just a black-white issue, and that was a beautiful example from you from Quincy as well. And I think often, until we had always stood when Chief Illini Wick came out, it was supposedly an honored symbol, but until I did the research and spoke to individuals that were Native American at a powwow and did my research, my views changed immediately, and I became an outspoken advocate for the fact that we as an institution, a public institution of higher education, had not done enough to really teach not only its students, but others, being a state-supported funded school, about Native American heritage. We had no Native American programs or studies. And then when we were grasping at keeping this quote-unquote honored symbol, then we wanted to put into place things to make it better so that we could keep that. And it's still, again, to my knowledge, there's been very few Native Americans, because they wouldn't compete to try out to become Chief Illini Wick, the eagle feathers and things like that, even though it had been purchased or given from a reservation at one time. Again, we talked about it, and it's until you speak to someone, until you have open ears to listen, you sometimes have blinders on.
Thank you.
Rose?
Our time is.
You'll have more time in a minute. But thank you so much for your willingness and for your conversation.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to share a little bit. The fact is that both people of color and white people suffer from anti-racism. There's a sense of superiority among whites, and people of color tend to feel inferior. It's like it was explained in our training. It's like a dance, and we have these unconscious attitudes and prejudices. When we get into anti-racism work, this is a conscious effort. We have to be conscious. We have to become aware. And I'm glad for your example. Is that Judy? Because it highlighted what we were saying in the vision statement, mutual relationships. The mutual relationships based on respect and equality. Remembering that each of us is of the family of God. We go right back to scripture again. It's based on the gospel. I'll give you an example of something that can happen that it wouldn't happen perhaps to a person with white privilege. About 2 weeks ago, my niece from St. Lucia came up to the States to help her son, to help him get integrated into a college. And she called me several times about their preparations. And this one day she called me and she said, you know, it's getting cold. And we went out and I said, you've got him a jacket, of course. Yes, we went out and we've got him a hoodie. And I felt a pang. I got a pang of fear. And I think you all know why. It just shot out at me, and I could see this young boy from St. Lucia, dark-skinned, going out perhaps to walk to class with his hoodie on, and what was going to happen to him. I kept my mouth shut. I didn't tell my niece anything about my fears. But this is the kind of thing we live with. This is the kind of presumptive thoughts, things that come out, and it's all unconscious, and you react to it. This is perhaps an indication of IRO. I'm expecting the worst. I'm expecting the worst because this is a society that hasn't shown me always the best. And so I still haven't told my nephew anything about the hoodie, but I think I will one of these days warn him about, he's in Atlanta too. So, you know, this is not an easy situation to be in. Presumption. When I came to the States, I was lodging before our marriage with a widowed lady and a cousin. And the widowed lady was very open. She had adopted a young man from South America, so she had traveled, and she knew other cultures and other people, but her cousin had not. And when my friend, Mary was her name, walked out of the room, Laura, her cousin, said to me, well, did you come here thinking money grew on trees? A presumption again. Somebody from an underdeveloped country coming into this country and expecting things to come from trees. For me, I had always been interested in the politics of the United States, so I proceeded to let her know that I knew a lot more than she thought I knew. And, you know, it's, as I say, this is the kind of situation we were always butting up against. At the UN, there were not a lot, well, yes, there were a lot of people of color working at the UN, but we all knew that we had to perform more and better than our white counterparts. I was asked at one point, the person who was in charge of grading our work said to me that he thought I was performing at a level where I should have an increase in grade. It had to go to New York. We were based in Geneva. Geneva is considered an outpost. So the grading had to be approved in New York. So he sent in the papers, and I was not given the increase for several reasons. One, there was a white male who was doing the same job in New York, and I was a female of color in an outpost, performing well, but not equivalent to the man in New York. These are the kinds of situations that we deal with all the time. And so I was very happy when I learned that the sisters wanted to get involved in anti-racism work. I'm still excited about it even after 15 years. And I think I would like to see some of you people, young people, get interested enough to know more about it. Today we're only giving a little spurt, a little excerpt on what anti-racism is all about. I would like to see you, perhaps, at least some of you, continue to learn more about this and to be effective in your communities and in your work lives with this work. And we're talking about systemic work. We're not talking about prejudice. We're talking about the systemic work, the work that is legislated, the work that is that forms the missions of corporations, of work ethics. We need to get into that area, not just the personal level area. I know a black man, and he's my friend. That's not what we're looking at. We're looking at the systems. What keeps the other person down? And what keeps the other person down is harmful not only to that person, but also to the person keeping the person down. We all benefit from anti-racism work. I think I've had enough. Thank you very much.
So much.
Yeah.
Before we watch the second snippet of the video, I want to simply echo what Daphne just said about how racism is damaging, even morally damaging, not only to the oppressed, maybe primarily to the oppressed, but also to the oppressor. And so I want to say a word about white privilege. As a white woman, as a white person involved in anti-racism work, one of the things I have learned about my white privilege is very foundational, and that is I don't even have to think about it. I have so internalized my racial superiority that one of the privileges I experience is I never have to think about being white. Like most white people, I have to intentionally reflect upon the privileges that are mine, even in order to name them, let alone reflect upon the privileges in a way to realize how many of those privileges are just that, privileges not shared by other people, primarily people of color. And so part of the individual movement and conversion for us white people is just that, to recognize I didn't sign up for white privilege. Nobody asked me if I wanted to be white. Do I like being white? Oh, yeah. But the privileges that come with my whiteness put me in a situation of having a special obligation morally in order to address racism. Now, lest we just all become overwhelmed with this, what do we do about all this? We're going to watch another little 3-4 minute snippet. And part of it is some reminders, an example perhaps, of how racism, how to recognize it first of all, and then how to address it.
My sister-in-law, who's half black, half white, but looks white. Blue eyes, whiter than most white folks, very white. She and I, we kind of grew up together. We raised our children together. So they're first cousins, and it's a wonderful, very, very multicultural family. So we're going in a Safeway one day. And Kathleen, my sister-in-law, is in front of me. And she's, writing a check for her groceries. Now, my daughter, who at the time was 10 years old, was standing with me, and I was directly behind her, getting ready to get my groceries. So Kathleen comes up, and the checker, who's a strawberry blonde, freckled, very delightful, warm, the checker, this young woman, is talking to Kathleen. Hey, how you doing? Isn't it a nice day today? They're just chatting up, and says, yeah. So Kathy writes her check, and she steps off to the side with her groceries because she's waiting for me. Of course, again, Kathleen looks white, right? So I come up. No conversation. She looks up at me. Absolutely no, just a little chatter. And I write my check. My daughter, however, is 10, notices immediately the difference in how she responds to me. So I write my check, and she goes, I'm going to need 2 pieces of ID. At which point, my daughter looks at me, and she gets very, very embarrassed, and tears are kind of coming up in her eye, like, Mommy, you're not gonna let her do this. Why is she doing this to us, right? So I'm trying to figure out what I should do, because behind me are 2 elderly white women, right? And I'm thinking, okay, so then I become the angry black woman, right? And they're going to be, and I'm just trying to second guess all the drama. So then I just give her the 2 pieces of ID. I said, some things you got to choose your battles, right? And then it gets worse. She pulls out the bad check book, right? So this is the book that shows the people who've written bad checks. So she starts searching for my license in the bad checks, at which point it's just out of control now. Just as I'm standing there trying to decide what to do, and it's really deeply humiliating. Now my daughter is in full-blown emotionally upset, who's 10. My sister-in-law walks back over, and she steps in and she says, excuse me, why are you doing this? And the checker goes, well, what do you mean? She goes, why are you taking her through all of these changes? Why are you doing that? She goes, well, this is our policy. She goes, no, it's not your policy because you didn't do that with me. Oh, well, I know you've been. She goes, no, she's been here for years. I've only lived here for 3 months. And so at this point, the 2 white elderly ladies go, oh, I can't believe what this checker has done with this woman. And it's totally unacceptable. At which point the manager walks over. So the manager walks over and says, is there a problem here? And then my sister-in-law again responds. She goes, yes, there is a problem here. Here is what happened. So you see, she used her white privilege. And even though Kathleen is half black and half white, she recognizes what that means. And she made the statement. She pointed out the injustice. And she, as a result of that one act, influenced everyone in that space. But what would have happened? I can't know for certain had the black woman said, this is unfair. Why are you doing this to me? Would it have had the same impact? But Kathleen knew that she walked through the world differently than I did. And she used her white privilege to educate and make right a situation that was wrong. That's what you can do every single day.
It's not very hard, is it? We have to be able to speak out. I used to let things pass, but since doing this work, this study, and I consider we're all still studying even after 15 years. It's not something we'll get a diploma for or work towards, but it's a life-changing thing. It's as I said before, it's a conscious decision, a conscious effort on our parts. It doesn't happen like white privilege, that it's an unconscious thing that happens. Anti-racism work is conscious work, and we must speak out. So when I see things now, I'm not so scared to say, to call it for what it is. It's the only way we can try to overcome some of the negatives that are out there.
I'd like to suggest, we only have about 3 more minutes, I think. But I'd like to give you an opportunity again to do a little buzzing at the table, some reactions or responses to what you just watched. And while we're doing that, one of the realizations that we white people, well, all of us, are realizing is that We live in a country that was founded on white supremacist values. And so we're not going to get into that topic today, but we are going to pass out a fact sheet of historical documents and movements within our country that verify that fact. So if you'd like to spend just maybe 3 more minutes together. What have you heard? What's moving within you? Once again, I have to interrupt you. I must say that your concentrated conversation is of great encouragement to us. I think we have time for maybe 2 persons that might want to share something, either your personal perspective, your reaction, your response, or something from your table. Okay, 1.
Most of you in this room do not know this, but all our lifelong friends do. And to make this extremely brief, Danny and I have been blessed, and we have 2 sons. And our sons were born in Africa, and they're adopted sons. We met them while they were college students, and have continued to the relationship. I had to shake my head when I heard about the presumption, because 2 short, very brief things. Our first son lived with us for quite a while, and he worked and he went to school. And one day I was coming home from the grocery store, and this lifelong friend of mine that lived several neighborhoods away but would walk her dog by, she said, "Kathy, I need to talk to you." And I said, "Well, hi, Pat, how are you doing today?" She says, "Oh, Kathy, you need to know this." She said, "A black man just come out your door and got in the car and drove off." And I said, "Well, Pat, that black man is our adopted son." I named the country from Africa. And I said, he was getting in his car because he was on his way to work and to school. 12 years ago this happened. She looked at me and she said, "Do you and Danny feel safe having him in this house, in your house?" Nope. And I said, "Pat, I think this has went far enough." I said, "Yes, we do. We feel very safe, and I have to go now." And when you mentioned the hoodie, he was very athletic, and I mentioned to him when he first moved in, because of our area, that it's a good area to jog and run and everything. He says, "Kathy," he called me Kathy. It wasn't Kathy. He said, "Kathy, are you crazy?" He said, "I can't run in this neighborhood." And I said, "Why not?" He said, "The police would be called, and he said they would bring me in the squad car home." He said, "I will run either at the university or Washington Park." So that's 2 brief stories. I've lived this. And I appreciate what your team is doing to bring this to the forefront. Thank you.
Hi. I was sort of suggested I should share something. I was raised in the south side of Chicago. Chicago's been my home all my life. But what you speak of is, even in our century and even in this year, is still as prevalent and all-encompassing as far as white privilege goes. My comment at the table was that I had not seen, I liked what the woman said about that my white privilege could be something positive, that it wasn't 100% negative. If I were, as you have mentioned, thinking, before I can do something, I have to think about something, right? I have to have the language in there. I mean, you know, I work at a ballpark in my retirement, and I mean no disrespect to the owners of that team, but, you know, I see that every single day. I mean, my white privilege. And it is, you know, every awful job, every, you know, is done by black people. You don't see anybody but white supervisors. I have one one white supervisor within my sections. I mean, black, right? So, you know, when I see this, at least I get through this, at least I get an opportunity, and I'm geared towards it. I watch, right? But not everybody is. Not everybody thinks like that. But, you know, my last comment or question is what, you know, it's bigger than I've even known, right? And I've seen it all my life. And it's huge, and I don't see it getting a lot better. I'd like to say it does, but I don't see it getting a lot better all the time. But it can start with me, right? In my part of the world where I'm at, you know, I can do something. So I suppose that's something. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very, very much. You've simply borne out the fact that racism continues to be with us, that it takes a partnership of white people and people of color teaming together, which, as Daphne explained so well in the beginning, is why we invited partners of color to form a team. We sisters cannot do this on our own.
Yes, well, thank you very much for your comments and for your attention. I hope this is just a little bit of encouragement to speak out, to do what you can, wherever you are, to overcome this sin of racism. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daphne and Sister Rose, for your powerful witness to the gospel message. We have now some examples to go out and live it, which is not easy, right? I did want you to know that the cracking the code that they showed with the one example is in the associate office material. And so if you would like to see the entire video, you can borrow that from the associate program and have more input. It was outstanding. Thank you both very, very much for joining us. We're going to take a 10-minute break now and share some refreshments. I would ask that you take the time to bring it back to your table, and since we have a full agenda today, and we'll get started on the next one about 10 minutes break. Thank you. Our next subject, as you know, is Jubilee Farm. Sister Rosemarie entered the community in 1967 and is celebrating her Golden Jubilee this year. Ministries have included quite a variety, teaching primary grades in Peoria, Chicago, and Matson, Illinois, administrator of St. Monica Maternity Center in Springfield, pastoral associate at Sacred Heart Church in Effingham, director and co-founder of Poplar House Clinic, a clinic for the underserved in Rogers, Arkansas, and after serving as counselor and then prioress general of our congregation, she finds herself down on the farm. As the newly appointed director, she is eager to tell the story of Jubilee Farm. So welcome, Sister Rosemarie.
Thank you, Joan, and thank you all for your attention. I'm really happy to share with you the story of Jubilee Farm. And just as a disclaimer, so you won't ask me any really hard questions at the end, I have only been there as director since August. So I have this huge learning curve, but I'm surely enjoying it. So there you see a picture of part of Jubilee Farm. And it's my pleasure to share the why, what, and who of this precious 164 acres of land. We're located just about 5 miles west of the mother house here on Old Jacksonville Road. How many of you are familiar with Jubilee Farm or have been there? Oh, that's wonderful. Good. So this may be a review for many of you. So I'm going to start the overview with looking at the why. You know, why do the Dominican Sisters of Springfield, for heaven's sakes, have a farm? Well, it's all about our faith tradition, and that's where we'll start. The ministry of Jesus is grounded in compassion for the fullness of life. And Jesus, in his teaching, showed a profound connection with the earth. Preaching within a farming community, his parables are filled with references to seeds and harvest, vineyards and weeds, rain and sunsets, sheep and nesting birds, wildflowers clothed with beauty. He even told of his Father's concern for a dead sparrow. So as the gospel stories show, bodies, earth, matter to God. All bodies, not only those beautiful and fully lived and full of life, but also those damaged, violated, starving, and dying. And not only those of humankind, but also those of the rest of creation. Love, as Jesus enfleshed and enacted it, is the meaning encoded in the heart of the universe. The loving God's original and ultimate intent is fullness of life, not just for a slice of the world, but for all. And as Jesus taught us, including poor human beings and all living creatures. It's an essential part of our faith, then, to honor God's creation and behave as responsible members of the earth community. The abundance of creation as we know it is now threatened and diminishing because of the irresponsible actions, many unintentional, of the human community. And this is systemic. We just heard about systemic racism, and this ecological devastation of creation is also systemic. We have to stop and take a good look at what is happening. So this perspective brings justice and ecological care into a closed embrace, and that is the gospel. And this is the gospel we preach at Jubilee Farm. Also within our faith tradition is our Dominican roots. Dominic, in his preaching, preached the truth of the goodness of all of creation. That's our 800-year heritage. He believed that everything in the material world is an expression of the goodness and love of God. And then Thomas Aquinas took on the monumental task of rewriting theology, our understanding of God in light of our universe and of creation. And Thomas wrote, "A mistake in our understanding of creation will necessarily cause a mistake in our understanding of God." And then we have the great spiritual mystic, Meister Eckhart, who wrote that every single creature is a book about God. Our universe, scientists have discovered, continues to expand and evolve. Human action that aborts nature's possibilities by wreaking harm to ecosystems and other creatures is nothing less than a profoundly sinful violation against life. It shortchanges nature's promise, killing off what might yet be. In so doing, it frustrates God's own creative vision for the future of the universe. And so we see that the whole universe, as God's creation, is the sacred journey, and that we are part of that sacred journey, each one of us. And this quote is from Thomas Berry, who is now deceased, but a wonderful theologian, scientist who wrote many books about the universe story. So, this understanding that all of creation is a book about God, found in our Christian, Catholic, Dominican roots, was expressed very clearly and timely in Pope Francis's recent encyclical Laudato Si. He's the first pope in recent decades to write an entire encyclical, an official teaching of the Church, on creation, and he called it Care of Our Common Home. In his encyclical, Francis addresses right relationship with the use of all created and human-made things, interconnection, what we do to any part of planet Earth, we do to ourselves, we hurt the whole, and responsibility. The abundance of creation is threatened by the irresponsible actions of the human community. And I can't help but think about the presentation that we just heard on anti-racism and the sin of racism and how all of this is connected. All of this is gospel. And all of us share mutual responsibility. The encyclical Laudato Si challenges us to respect and love all of God's creation, all human beings, plants, and animals. And this respect for all creatures challenges us not to waste, but to consume with a conscience. This way of living and relating to God's creation is a challenge to all of us to integrate this into our daily lifestyle. How do we use material or man-made things, money, technology, books, food, water? The human and the non-human beings, the poor, prisoners, fetuses, refugees, animals. Spiritual and divine gifts are talents, charisms, time, apostolic energy, common life. And the Catholic faith tradition, church, is not the only faith tradition calling for this kind of ecological and spiritual consciousness. Other faith communities have also made such commitments to the care of creation, and this is just a partial list of them. But this awareness, this consciousness that all of us are called to care for creation has surely grown and continues to grow as we see life on this planet as we have known it eroding. Now, the advantage of Pope Francis writing this encyclical just a few years ago gave credibility to what religious women have been preaching for decades, and especially Dominican religious women. What we're looking at here is a farm called Genesis Farm, which was established by the Caldwell, New Jersey Dominican Sisters in 1980. And why did they establish a farm? To preach and model sustainability, to educate people on living in right relationship with all of creation, to teach how do we take what we need and give back to the earth so that we can all continue to depend on her. How to respect the use of water, air, soil, as well as the importance of eating healthy foods grown locally and without chemicals. So that was 1980. And we Dominican Sisters of Springfield followed in 1999 with what we named Jubilee Farm. And why did we do it? To follow through on all that we had been learning about creation, what was happening, how we might do our part to care for creation, to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the earth community, and to share the gift of the land. And when we established or bought the land, it's out west, as I said, and a whole area that continues to be developed. all around us. Other farm areas are disappearing and this concrete is being poured. And so, as someone said, this land is a jewel and we need to keep polishing it. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an understanding of why we have Jubilee Farm. What are the roots? It's the gospel, our faith tradition. It's Dominican. And now we're going to look at the what of Jubilee Farm. And so we'll go on a little tour around the grounds, and I'll point out some of the things that you would see or will see when you come and visit. As I said before, it's 164 acres, and we have pastures, woods, ponds, creeks, wetlands, and gardens. It's a place for solitude, where anyone can come, walk the paths, sit on the benches that are interspersed throughout the land, and just enjoy the quiet. And that's our peace pole there. We want this to be a place of peace for all who come. We have a naturally grown labyrinth based on the model of the the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Chartres, France. And a labyrinth, I put a little brochure at each table, is a place for reflective walking, moving toward the center and then walking back out. It's a very ancient model of prayer and pilgrimage, and that again is there year-round for people to come and just have a place of contemplation. One of our focuses at the farm is restoration of the land. Because of chemicals that have been used on the land over and over again in past years, and the invasive plants, trees that have grown in the land, there's a lot of damage to the earth. And so Nate Hoyle, who works part-time for us, is in charge of the restoration project. And he's doing different things such as shoring up the wetlands, removing the invasive species, and whenever this is done, it allows the native species to flourish. It brings back the butterflies and the wildflowers and so forth. And this is an ongoing project. It will take many, many years and then continued maintenance for that to happen. And the same with the woods, so that the trees that are there can flourish. And that all of this becomes a wonderful habitat for the wildlife. Now, the buildings. The upper left is, we call it Sienna Vale, and 3 of us, Dominican sisters, live there, Sisters Anita, Sharon, and myself. Next is the llama and alpaca shed, and we have 2 of each. The chicken coop and the equipment shed. The newest building down here in the second row is the Creative Arts Center, which is serving us very, very well. It's going on its 3rd year. La Casa is a complete house on the grounds, 3 bedrooms, kitchen, living room, a small meeting room, that people are able to rent if they want to make a private retreat, or a couple of people make a retreat. And it's used for different purposes. And then, of course, our greenhouse, and that's for growing the seedlings and so forth. And Sister Suzanne, our gardener, is sitting in the back of the room there. And she'll be hanging around to tell you more about the gardens. And again, our complete vision statement, revised in 2017. Jubilee Farm seeks to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the earth community and to share the gift of the land. Our diverse ministries call us all to live simply and sustainably. So it takes a lot of effort, but we certainly try to practice what we preach about living simply. Okay, now my favorite part is the community of Jubilee Farm. There they are. Upper left there is Hannah, and then across on the other side is Doc. Those are the two llamas. And then we have Lyndon, Alpaca, and Corby. And we put the extra picture of Corby there because Corby is a cream-colored, but likes nothing more than rolling in the dirt. So, and then of course we have our hens. Let me just go back regarding our llamas and alpacas. They are not just here to educate. We can talk to students and so forth about those animals, but we also use their fiber for making yarn, and then that goes into the weavings. Our chickens here, we use their eggs. We use them for eggs, not for growing baby chicks. But, and when we have a surplus, we share it with the mother house here. And again, it's part of an educational piece for those who visit the farm. And then numerous wildlife that, of course, we probably don't know half of who or what is part of the community of Jubilee Farm. And these are just a few. But what I want to point out is that top one sort of looks like a turtle, but looks a little strange, doesn't it? Well, this is an alligator turtle, and it was found on our property this past year. And it's an endangered species. And so when Nate found it one day when he was out doing the restoration work, he recognized right away it was an endangered species. So we notified the state of Illinois. He took the turtle in, they examined it and so forth. And then the turtle came back to our wetlands. But that was pretty exciting. To discover such a little guy, but part of an endangered species. And here are the human element of Jubilee Farm. Sister Suzanne is in charge of the gardens. Those are the areas around the buildings where she grows herbs, flowers, and vegetables. Sister Margatrice in the middle is the woodworker. Sister Sharon is former director and educator now for the farm and gives retreats. Mike Blasco, of course, someone we could not do without, who fixes and repairs and does the heavy work at the farm. He's our jack of all trades. Myself, and then Sister Anita, who does the fiber work, teaches. She's also a spiritual director and has cooking classes. Now, if you want to know the real director of Jubilee Farm, here she is. This is Stanley, although it's a she, who as soon as I leave my chair, there she is. But she's our indoor cat. We also have 3 barn cats who sort of keep the rodent supply down. And really important part of our community are the volunteers. As you see, the staff is rather small, and we depend on others to come and join us in many different ways at the farm. Now, here at the left side, you see Bill Irvin. Bill Irvin just retired, but for 13 years, he came to the farm, he worked with Sister Suzanne on the gardens, and he brought his clients from the mental health center. And so for those clients to be able to touch the earth, to grow things, to learn how to do that part of gardening. And so Bill will be sorely, sorely missed. He's moving back to Montana. In the middle is Sister Linda Hayes, and she's a volunteer who does weaving. She was making a shroud there and giving instructions to members of the Dominican Collaborative Novitiate who were visiting. In the upper right corner is Tony Rothering. Tony is a scientist He teaches at Lincoln Land, and he comes twice a year to do bird banding at the farm. Our next time is May 18th, and they put up nets to catch the birds very gently, bring them back to where the rest of us are waiting, and he will explain the species, the kind of bird. He'll check their fat, he'll weigh them, puts a little band on them, and then allows us to let them go. It's an awesome, awesome experience. But through that, we learn that there are more than 20 different species of birds on our farmland. And this is done across the nation to check migratory patterns and to see how climate change might be impacting it. It's a wonderful experience. And if you're in the area on May 18th, please come by. We'll have it on social media. And then one of our associates, Dee Nelson there, who is also a volunteer in the fiber area and does a lot of weaving and measuring of yarn and so forth. Oh, yeah, you might recognize some faces here. Sister Mary Jones, Sister Loyola, Judy, some of the, and Sister Samuela, Regina Marie. This is our annual holiday craft fair, which brings in some much needed revenue. We count on our volunteers to not only help us with that day, but to do baking, to make crafts that we can sell, and so forth. So our next one is December 7th. So if you have any interest in something like that, just let me know. But it's a real community event. Okay, this is our gift area at the farm where we sell our wares, some woodworking, weavings, jewelry, beadwork, pottery, and of course the revenue again comes to support the ministry at the farm. A wonderful thing happened as a result of our last craft fair. I don't know if many of you from town are familiar with Studio on 6th, downtown Springfield. It's an artist consignment shop. And the owner and manager of this shop came to our craft fair, and she spoke to me afterwards, and she said, you know, we have a community outreach area in the back of our shop for not-for-profits. And if you bring your pottery down, we'll set it up in a display. You don't have to pay rent for your space, and they get a very small percentage of anything sold. So it's one more way we can get our name as well as some of our wares. So if you're ever downtown, please do stop in and greet Alicia, because we're really grateful to her. And on their Facebook page, if we have an event, they're advertising for us, so we like to support them too. Okay, another part of the community of Jubilee Farm are the Eagle Scouts, who will come and build projects, the UIS Biology Club, who come and work with Nate on the restoration program. They work hard, and then we fix them a nice meal and feed them so that they'll come back. And many of them do, even after they're finished college, they'll come back and help us out. So we depend on our volunteers, on monetary and in-kind donations. We've received many weaving looms, carpentry tools, and so forth for the woodworking. The whole Creative Arts Center was built through donations. So we're very grateful to our benefactors and anyone who thinks that they might have something that we can use or would like to make a donation. Our programs include fiber art, and Sister Anita, as I said, is the fiber guru. She teaches spinning, weaving. They have weaving weekends and workshops. She also gives retreats and spiritual direction. Sister Suzanne is our gardener, and you're looking at some of the gardens there. And she has currently started a program called Adopt a Garden. And she's sitting back there in case you might be interested in adopting one of our little gardens and coming during the growing season to help weed and water and so forth. So we'll be putting this out also on social media, but if you're interested, she's back there. We're having a meeting for anyone who would like to be part of Jubilee Farm and do some gardening. We have a meeting on March 8th, and she has information about that. And then we have woodworking with Sister Margaret Therese. And she also, if you know any woodworkers that would like to volunteer some time and some assistance, she would be interested. Our pottery room, right now we do not have a potter. We have a volunteer who's learning, reviewing some of the pottery skills, but we do have pottery that we're still selling. We use our large meeting area in the Creative Arts Center for meetings, workshops, and also people can rent it for board meetings. For instance, the Sacred Heart Griffin had their board meeting there in October. Baby showers, wedding showers, just about anything that people might want a large, beautiful space to use. We offer retreats and prayer days locally as well as internationally. The pictures at the bottom show Sister Sharon with some Dominicans in New Zealand where she gave a retreat. And on the right side, that's in Ireland, the Dominicans there where she gave a retreat. Farm tours, local, international visitors come to see the farm. And in a couple of weeks on the national level, we'll have members from St. Dominic's Health Services in Jackson coming for an afternoon at the farm. So, what are we about at Jubilee Farm? Hospitality. And one of the things I want to say is that all are welcome to come to the farm. It's not our land, it's not our mission, it's God's land, it's God's mission. And one of the hospitality pieces is what Suzanne does with the gardens, because as people drive in, that's the first thing they see are the flowers and the growth, and but all are welcome. We try to live what we preach in community, in celebration, in education, collaboration, restoration and healing of the land, and to pray with and for all of creation. And why are we at Jubilee Farm? Because God's mission is at the heart of all we do. This is a place, like all creation, that's beautiful in any season. One of our recent winter storms, summer, and fall. We do have an orchard with apples and some peaches. Sunrise and sunset. Wonderful place to come and look at the stars. Nighttime. And so I invite you to join us in any way that you might want to. Through your prayerful support, come and visit and walk the grounds. As a volunteer, a benefactor, or a participant in any of our programs. Because those who dwell among the beauties and mysteries of the earth are never alone or weary of life. It's from the scientist Rachel Carlson. And you're exactly what the world needs now. Thank you.
It's a rich afternoon, wouldn't you agree? Our next three speakers are going to speak to us about Cor Unum, which is the House of Hospitality that our community is in process of working with. And there are three speakers, Sister Mary Clare Fichtner, Sister Lori Kirchman, and Sister Beth Murphy. Sister Mary Clare has completed 60 years of ministry in this Dominican congregation. She has ministered as a teacher and principal in Catholic schools, and she was one of my first principals that I had at Carrollton, Illinois. Sister is from Michigan, and she is, I believe, one of the first pioneers of anti-racism in her work at St. Patrick's School and in some of her studying also. She is now a member of the START team. And she's a part of this new project, so open to many new things. Sister Lori holds a BA in Music Education from the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, and an MA in Liturgical Music from St. John's University in Collegeville, Minnesota. Sister Lori taught music to elementary students for 10 years. She has been a director of music and liturgy for 24 years and has been involved in liturgy and music since she was in high school. In addition to those experiences, Sister also served as the vocation director for our community for 6 years and as the liturgist musician at the Dominican Mother House. She doesn't look old enough, right? Sister Beth Murphy is the communication director for our Dominican sisters and has been professed since 1985, in addition to her ministry in communications for the congregation, the Diocese of Springfield, and the National Coalition for Church Vocations. She spent 5 years in Detroit, serving with and among Iraqi refugees, and 3 years in Chicago's Pilsen neighborhood at St. Pius V. She has also been blessed with the brief experience of living in host houses for the U.S. Dominican volunteers. So sisters, we welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you. The first thing we'd like to do is ask you to bring to mind a young adult, someone that you know between the ages of 18 and 35. So just bring to mind a young adult, 18 to 35. And we'd like you to hold him or her in your mind throughout our time together this afternoon. And as you think about that person, what would be your greatest hope or your wish for that person? Think about what would be your greatest hope or wish for that person. And then we'd like you to respond to that question. So anybody, what would be your greatest hope or wish for a young adult that you know?
My greatest hope for my person is that they stay connected to God in prayer and in thought and actions.
Thank you. That's wonderful.
I think mine is quite similar. In teaching, especially the upper grades in elementary school, and in connecting with young people, people of all ages, my greatest hope is that no matter what they go through in life, that they always realize God's great personal, deep love for them, and that God is always and will always be there for them and with them, as in for us and with us.
Great. Thank you very much.
I would want the person to deepen their spirituality, stay close to God, has been mentioned, and also get to know the Springfield Dominican sisters very well, and perhaps be attracted so much, and they would like to really become a religious and enter our community. I think that's extremely important.
Okay, thank you, Sister Palmer.
I would kind of echo what others have said. I thought of two of my nieces who are in this age group, and I would definitely like for them to value their faith and live the gospel. They're active, wonderful women, and that's my prayer for them.
Thank you very much.
I'd like
people in that age group to grow in their critical thinking skills so that they can have positive influence on other people, especially in the nation in which we live now. And they can grow and mature because they've spent time deepening their critical thinking skills.
Great, thank you.
And I'd like for those young people to get in touch with who they are, who they want to be, and perhaps even more importantly, have the kind of positive relationships or experience of support from others that's going to empower them to do that. It doesn't happen alone.
That's right, it doesn't. Thank you. That's very good. We have a second question for you. So, thinking of that person, what gifts do you see in that person that he or she can bring to our world? What are the gifts that person has to bring to our world? Go ahead. She's got a microphone coming. Sorry.
Compassion and respect is what I hope that they will maintain.
Is that what you see in them? The gifts you see
Yes,
in them?
I do.
Great, wonderful, thank you.
Yes, I do.
Good.
I have a great nephew that is a fireman, and he has this compassion and pity for the people that he goes in to rescue or to put out the fire in their home. And this is what I look for in Bradley.
Wonderful, thank you.
I see a strong desire to make a difference toward the good in this world.
Yes, we see that too. Thank you, that's great. Anything else? Okay, well, go ahead. One more.
Vitality and hopefulness.
Yes, that's right. We see all of that as well. And in our new ministry called Cor Unum, we hope to bring all of that, and we hope that they bring all of that to us. We hope that it is a mutual helping each other. So Sister Beth is now going to talk to you and explain to you exactly what Cor Unum is.
So yes, you already know everything that you need to know about Cor Unum because it's within you. You've just expressed that. That we want to bring to young people the gifts that we have, and we want to receive from them what they have for us. And support and encourage them. Oh, well, it always helps if you turn the thing on. There we go. Okay, this quote, which we found from Sister Ilia Delio, captures a lot of why we chose the name Cor Unum for this new ministry. The Christian of today must gather from the body all the spiritual power it contains. This means to live from the center of the heart where love grows, and to reach out to the world with faith, hope, and trust in God's incarnate presence. Isn't that a great mission statement for any Christian? How do we live from the center of the heart of God and share that with the world in our own lives? Cor Unum, how many of you know what it is? Since we have so many parochial school people here, do you know what Cor Unum means? The sisters don't count. Somebody else. Oh, okay, well maybe we might have that little gap of people who took Latin in school. You know, it's happening again. Clare Becker on her switchboard, she's studying Latin, so she would know what this was. Cor Unum means one heart, yes. Cor Unum in Latin. And the inspiration for that name is really, it's deeply rooted in our Christian tradition and in the history of our congregation. When we moved from Jacksonville to Springfield and came to this property, the youngest sister in the community got to choose the name of the convent. And because it was the Feast of the Sacred Heart when they visited here, she suggested Our Lady of the Sacred Heart. That's how we got our name. So Cor Unum harkens back to that story. And the third source of the name is the growing awareness among Christian theologians of understanding the Christ as the heart of the universe. And some of you might know who Teilhard de Chardin is, a Jesuit mystic who wrote a lot about cosmology. almost 100 years ago now, he had a great devotion to the Sacred Heart, and that was a part of his developing mysticism and spirituality. So what is it exactly? You've gotten a little bit of an idea already from the material that we've provided, but our goal is to make Cor Unum a place of mutual support. So it's not just, we're not just there for the young people. We're there to be in mutual relationship with young women who are roughly between the ages of 18 and 35, and who have a desire to deepen their spiritual lives, be of service, and make change for a better world. I often talk with the young women about the story of our Dominican brothers who lived 500 years ago in Santo Domingo, how they approached their preaching ministry. They prayed the scriptures together in preparation for a homily that one of the friars would actually deliver on Sunday. And they did that in a very powerful way at Santo Domingo in preaching against the enslavement of the Indians. So it was the entire community together that did the theological reflection and the analysis, the critical thinking that Sister Barb Blessy was talking about. They undertook that as a community, and then one of them preached that homily. And so that is kind of a model that we see for what will happen for us at Cor Unum. These are some of the young women that we're involved with. And I know people we talk about it as the Dominican House of Hospitality. And yes, it's that. But and we discovered, and you're going to hear a little bit more about this from Sister Mary Clare, but we discovered that when we didn't have the house, we thought we had a house, it fell through, now we're assigned to a ministry, we've got no place. So we started looking around us and started engaging in relationships with young women. And what we realized was, in the house, we can have 3 people living with us. But there's this broader group of young women who very much want to be engaged and supported by us as mentors and supporters. So we're thinking about this and talking about this now in two ways. There's Cor Unum Village and there's Cor Unum House. And the village is a dynamic community of women who become a source of friendship and mutual support for one another and for neighbors, whether that be in the neighborhood where our house is or people on the other side of the world, how we understand ourselves as neighbors to the people of the world, who can share in our ministry together by sharing their gifts and their skills and their creativity, accompanying one another, and living in relationship to God and the neighbors. So that can be an infinite circle of people, right? We can only have 3 in the house, but we can have an unlimited number of women who engage with us in other efforts and projects. And then Cor Unum House. So you notice we're talking about young people between the ages of 18 and 35. The women who come to the house will need, I think for obvious reasons, to be 21 or older. It solves all kinds of problems if you're not living with minors. And they have to want to experience a transformation of living in an intentional community of simplicity, prayer, and service. So they would be living very much within the charism of the Dominican order. And we're asking them to commit to a minimum 9-month residency in the house, with an extension possible of, we're thinking maybe as long as 3 years. But after that, we want them to be moving on and getting on with their lives. And they will be leading alongside us within the context of Cor Unum Village and whatever service ministries we intend to participate in. How many of you see Just Words magazine? Have you seen the latest issue? Okay, so in that issue, we interviewed 3 of the young women who are engaged with us at Cor Unum, and you'll recognize those pictures up here. They're here. And if you haven't taken a look at that article yet, you might want to, because they have some really exciting and interesting perspective on the world, which we want to be able to engage as we go about ministering with them. So because we've been engaging with women, we have about 30 women on the books. We don't have that many of them ever gathered together at one time, but there are about 30 women who've expressed interest in being in relationship with us. And we've been building those relationships, so now we are really primed and are ready to be moving into our place. And Sister Mary Clare is going to talk to you about that.
How many of you have ever moved from one house to another? Okay. Well, this project that you're hearing about, especially what you heard about from Beth, was a foundational idea that was rising up in this community among leadership and some other people that were connected with leadership or talking to them. And they were just kind of dreaming about it until a group, Beth was one of them, Sister Mary Jean was another one, and maybe Sister Teresa was one. And they were living in St. Cabrini Parish here in Springfield, Illinois. And the idea came that the old convent where the sisters used to live in St. Cabrini Parish wasn't really being used much for anything, and so maybe that could be a place where we could have this house. And then the dreams just doubled and doubled and multiplied, and we were all set. The three of us were all set to go live there. And then the whole thing fell through. I won't go into all those details, but it fell through, so that all we had left was a dream, and no physical reality. And we started just plain looking for another place where we could bring this dream into fulfillment. And we were not very successful. It was a rather difficult time for us. And like most stories like this, you know, we had the cooperation of the St. Cabrini Parish helping us get started. And we still had that. There were still people from the parish that were working with us and helped us to see how we could start working with people instead of the building. So that's how we got started with all these young women that we have met in the last year and a half since then. We also went over to see the neighborhood there was a house presented to us by a neighborhood association that rehabs their houses. And we went over there to their organizational meeting and met them. It was called the Enos Park Neighborhood Association here in Springfield. It's on the north side and east side of Springfield. And they were interested in what we were doing too. And then there was a fella named Fletcher Farrar, who was the director of Old Neighborhood Rehab. And he got a friend of his, and they started taking a look at any of their old houses that they had around that they were developing. And that was, this one day was presented to us. Now this is what it looked like. See, I don't think that looks so bad, but you know, I've come from some pretty bad looking houses. Anyway, when they say, "What do you mean, Clara? That doesn't look so." Anyway, the front, you see the front, that was a porch. This original house is 100 years old, and it's called a Foursquare. We have a few of them in Springfield. And the original was a porch, but they had filled it in order to have more rooms. And then inside, the neighborhood organization had torn out everything that was no longer of any use. So there we are looking through the 2x4s. That was in the living room. And you could see the joy and the happiness and the excitement of us, because we still know how to dream even when we're looking through 2x4s. and boarded up doors. Okay. Do I have one more picture? This then, with the help largely of the man on the right side, Fletcher Farrar, who is the director of the rehab, we found these other people who were experts in this. So on the very opposite side, we have John Schaefer, who's an architect, who has worked with rehab houses. And way over there behind Mr. Fletcher is Ryan, who is his helper, a young man who's his helper. And then next to John Schaefer are the two contractors that he found from the neighborhood, Calvin Pitts and his helper Julius, and they do most of the on-site putting it all into reality. We Dominicans have a special person, Sister Kathleen Kinney, right there in the middle. She has got a lot of experience with building houses and furnishing houses that have just been built. We've done quite a bit of building in this community, and she's been part of some of that. Next to her is Sister Barbara Blessy, who is with that day was our contact person with the administration, who always sends somebody along to see how it's going. And then the three of us. No, Beth is taking the picture. Most of the time, Beth is taking the picture. She's the communication director. But I'm there and Lori's there. So this was a team picture that we one time got it, and there we are looking. And you can see behind us, everything is still, nothing has been done yet to furnish anything. One last thing, that's all I'm going to say for now. I'll let Lori tell some more pictures.
Too many microphones. Okay. So everyone keeps asking us, when are you going to move in? Well, first it was the end of December, and then it was then of February, and we're not sure. Maybe March, maybe April, we hope. Anyway, so we just want to show you some of the pictures. This is the kitchen, and actually it's this is the almost finished part of the floor. This is what the dining room used to look like. And this is what it looks like now. So the floor is in. They've redone the buffet. Okay, so there's progress. And there's some of the woodwork that they've restained. Yes, isn't it beautiful? 110 years old, yeah. And there's the staircase. You can see on the right there's a mirror, a wooden mirror. Okay. So this is the staircase coming down. And we hope to sit on that bench and look out the window. And if you look on the right, that's the old, like at the beginning, that's the what we're going to call the community room. And if you look in the mirror, if the person in the mirror, that's the floor that's been put in, and that's the dining room in the picture of the mirror. That's what it looks like now. Or at least it did about 3 weeks ago. Yeah, we hope it's better now, but anyway. Here's what it used to look like on the left, and here's what it's looking like now on the right. So they had to take out the, what do you call that siding? The vinyl siding. They took all the vinyl siding off and painted the wood. So the wood is what is there now. So the left is what it used to look like. The right is what it looks like now. So now we have a porch. The porch was rebuilt again. And in order to have 6 people, we needed to add on to it in the back. And so this is the foundation of the new part of the building, which has a bedroom, 2 baths, and like a mudroom with closets. So those are pictures of that. And you always notice Sister Clare always has her hard hat on. She's good. This is the back, what it used to look like. And there's the foundation as it was going up. So you see on the right, that is the dormer. There used to be a tree there. They took down all the trees, unfortunately, but they weren't in very good shape. And then the dormer, what it looks like now. That's what we're going to call the upper room. And it's a wonderful 3rd floor, and we're going to use it for private prayer, for quiet, for reading, things like that. So we're kind of excited about that. So this is a side view, what it used to look like over here, and what it's looking like now.
So that's the house. We have a young woman who's really interested in moving in with us. And I could keep you here another hour just telling you the story of how she came to us. I won't. But just, you know, the Holy Spirit is really moving and working. That's all I really want to say to you about that. And it's along the lines of that old movie about the White Sox. If you build it, they will come. What was that? Field of Dreams? If you build it, they will come. That's really starting to happen for us. So we're very, very excited about that. If you want to get engaged with us, there's lots of different ways that you can do that. I have a handout that we're going to give to you in a second, and there's some little cards that have email contact information, and there's plenty of those. I just put a few out on the table, but I've got some more. So if you think you might want to be in touch with us, take one of those cards. If you think you know any young woman who might be interested, take several of them and provide those to her. But the first obvious need that we're going to have is help moving in. So if any of you are interested in that. The second one is landscaping. The yard was not looking very good when we moved in, and you can imagine it's a lot worse now. So we won't be doing that immediately, but there's going to be a lot of need for doing some landscaping in the yard. Another one is program development. So we want any programs we develop, we want to do that in conjunction with the women who are part of this. We don't want to do it for them, but we want to do it with them. But we may need some assistance and some help from people with various kinds of skills in that area. We will always need financial support for the house. The women are going to have to be able to provide money to contribute to household expenses and their own food. We're requiring them to either be working full-time or going to school and working, so that it's not a vacation house. But we will want financial support for the kinds of programs that we get involved in, and for some of maybe our volunteer ministry. And then in-kind support. When we were getting ready to go to Cabrini, and Pam will remember this because she's a Cabrini parishioner, we had the Franciscan sisters were just happening to be closing down one wing of their mother house, and they had almost brand new furniture. So frankly, we have almost every bed and stick of furniture we need. There are other things we may need. Kitchen materials, when you have convents that are opening and closing all the time. So we have a lot of the stuff that goes in the house, but there will be other needs that come along. When we look at the driveway, we say, oh goodness, we're going to need a snowblower because it is one long driveway. We're not shoveling that thing. So stuff like that, we will have some in-kind needs, and we'll let those be known as we go through. So these are a handful of ways that any of you might get engaged with us, and there will probably be more as we move along, as we move through it. Jubilee Farm and our anti-racism work will also be a big part of what we do at Cor Unum, because those are integral to who we are as Springfield Dominicans. So we are hoping that we will have a multicultural house. We don't want it just to be all white women living with us. And we want to be able to engage in the kind of conversation and dialogue about dismantling racism in our world that you heard from Sister Rose, Miriam, and Daphne this morning. And I can imagine that we will be at the farm frequently volunteering and learning. So it's not really, these are three separate kinds of ministries, but they're all interwoven because they're all expressions of the way we bring the gospel to light, which is what Sister Joan titled this day today, right? How do we uncover the light of the gospel? Well, these are three ways that we are attempting to do that as Springfield Dominicans. So we're right up on our time here. If anybody has any question, we'll be happy to respond. Oh, Clare, come on.
One more little thing I wanted to mention was that this of places of interest to a lot of people. Some people nationally, I'm not going to get into that, but some people locally. Back when they were talking about this possible house of hospitality in Cabrini's, the Journal Register had a big article about it in the paper. So people in the city have, whenever they find out that we're doing this, they have asked us, how's it coming? They've been asking us, and they're still asking, they have not gotten tired of saying, how's it coming, even though they've been asking that now for a year and a half. The other thing is, both the state senator and our own alderwoman have been to visit us one time. We were asked to come out there and greet them because they wanted to see the possibility of rehabbing a house and then it being used like this. So I come from the old days when we had to fight like crazy for scattered site housing in our community. And I remember the trouble we had with a bunch of people who were not related living in the same house. And here they are welcoming us, not even mentioning anything about that we're not all related, not giving us too much trouble with little details like whether you got the right kind of, they did make us put in water. They did make us put in a sprinkler system. But you know, I remember all the things that the systemic idea threw in our path back in those days. And we haven't experienced any of that. So there's a welcomeness on the part of the city to have us be there. So that puts us in a good place to do the kind of work that our women want to do in this particular city that's open to them doing it. That is very, very hopeful to me.
Oh, thank you so much. And just a minute or two for questions, because we don't want to keep you beyond your time. But yeah.
It's a comment, Beth.
Well,
It's a comment because when Beth mentioned the Holy Spirit, when God's got his hand on a project and a dream and people, what may look like a disaster, he's got much better in store. And just, it's a blessing to see this. It really is. Thank you so much. Sisters, your spirit is catching. Thank you for sharing the energy of the gospel light. It's with deep gratitude that we thank all of our presenters today. Their love of mission is certainly evident in the vitality of their presentations today. So thank you once again to Daphne, Sisters Miriam, Rose, Marie, Clare, Lori, and Beth. Blessings on all of your ventures. We thank also Aaron and Sister Beth, who help us again and again and again with the technology support. We couldn't do it without them. And I do want to acknowledge the presence of our past Associate Director of our community, Sister Palmieri, who can tell me how I did when we're finished here. Our presenter for the March meeting is Sister Margaret Schreiber, who will be presenting on living the liturgy. And if you can believe it, that's our presentation, last presentation before our retreat in April. At our next meeting, we will be talking about the letter that you are asked to write to Sister Rebecca Ann Gemma, our Prioress General, telling her what this program has meant to you, what you have gained, and asking if you could be accepted as a Springfield associate. And so you'll also begin to work on your commitment statement. So these three presentations, along with the history of our Dominican orders, the social justice principles, all that we've listened to are preparation for how might you like to do your commitment in a different way because you're a Dominican associate. So not necessarily something new, although you might choose something that you've heard or something you're doing that you want to add this Dominican charism to. So maybe between now and next month, you and your sponsor could do some talking about both of those things. Next month, there will be sample letters here for you to see what others have written and sample commitment statements. Blessings on your February days. This morning's scripture reading on Corinthians 13, certainly a wonderful guide for us during these February days. So blessings on your journey, and God bless you all. Thank you. Suzanne.
One of the things that I'd like to mention about Jubilee Farm was I sell plants there, okay? A lot of people don't know that, but this is going to be my 5th year of selling plants. We do have a greenhouse, and I sell, last year I sold 22 different types of herbs. I sell flowers. Most of the flowers, though, are native, okay? And I have a booming voice as it is. And I also sell some vegetable produce, okay, that normally you'd have to do it from seed first before you can plant. And I usually start selling sometime in April, but we will put that on our Facebook page concerning that. But, you know, if you're interested, if you are a gardener, okay, and you're interested in getting, and everything is organic. My potting soil, my seeds, everything, all of our seeds, potting soil, everything is done organically. So if you're interested in coming to the farm and even helping with that or buying or whatever, we're going to be there. All right, thank you.